I brought along something that means a lot to me this morning. My grandmother made these socks for me when I was an undergraduate, so they've been in the drawer for over 50 years. She knitted them when she was about 70 years old. When she was a girl, she made thousands of pairs of socks, as many other Australian women did for soldiers serving in the AIF. She made so many pairs that as an old woman, she could sit down and make the socks without a pattern. I love my woolen socks, but 2 other pairs she made for me wore out, and I make sure that these ones stay safe in the drawer. The socks connect me directly with the 400,000 young Australian men who volunteered to fight in World War I. In our church, we're surrounded by memorials to people from our parish who volunteered to serve their nation in the armed forces. Our hall is a memorial to those men and women. So is our hymn board. So is our altar. We say those words, lest we forget, at every Anzac Day service. There are many reminders before us, and we can never forget. It's that unbroken and precious connection with our fathers and mothers, our grandparents and our great-grandparents, that is the real source of the strength of Anzac Day. In the church, we affirm every time we say the creed that we believe in the communion of saints. It's very real. We are connected with the faithful people who built our church back in 1924 and who have worshipped here ever since. We are connected with the saints and scholars, with Christian men and women over centuries, now gathered to God in a greater light and on a further shore. We feel part of them, even though we haven't walked directly with them. All Australians, no matter what our background, feel that we are part of that original sacrifice of Australian and New Zealand young men and of the men and women who served in later years and in later wars. It's extraordinary how this works. The person I know who is most moved and respectful of the Anzacs was born in Africa, and she came to Australia as a young woman. She's fiercely proud of Australia. It's part of your heritage and mine because of who we are. At St. Paul's, we choose to celebrate Anzac Day in our Sunday worship, even though this is really a civil celebration and observation. But we cannot listen to the stories of sacrifice and mateship without understanding the profoundly Christian connection that exists here. Let me tell you about 2 Anzac Day services I attended at sea in the good old days when we could still go cruising. The first one was organised on board ship by an Australian Uniting Church minister, and it was like any Anzac Day service in a country town. The microphone failed at the crucial moment. On the few orders of service distributed to the large group, only 2 verses of Abide With Me were printed, although the recorded music gave us 5 verses, so we hummed along for 3 verses. In a mix-up, 2 people had been asked to read the ode, and so we had it twice. But people went away very happy because the message of sacrifice and courage in the minister's words had been clear and very appropriate, and the rest didn't really matter. The second service on board was much more slick and proficient. It had been organised by the Roman Catholic chaplain on board, a good man and a Californian. He did his best, but he got it wrong. He spoke at length and with feeling about the valour of young men under fire, of the blessing of God on a just war, and on the courage and determination of our mighty fighting men. The Australians looked at one another with a mixture of shame and embarrassment. We sort of knew what he meant, but it was so unlike what we were used to hearing, what we knew Anzac Day was really about. In our worship this morning, we remember courage, certainly, but mostly we recall the suffering, the loss, and the waste of young life. In our worship, we connect that suffering and loss with the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Let us share today in that memory and in the pride that comes when we remember that we are the children of those men and those women. And let us rejoice in the connections that bind us to those men and women who sacrificed for us.